Table for One, episode 26, our interview with Isaac Childres, designer of Gloomhaven. Hey everybody, welcome back to Table for One. This is episode 26. This is Anthony once again with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
And we have a very special guest with us this week, Isaac Childres, the designer of Gloomhaven, a little game you guys might have heard of.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So we wanted to get you on for a couple reasons, actually. Not only the fact that you have the current hottest game in the universe just released to backers that people are eagerly asking about, but I know you also have an upcoming Kickstarter and some opportunities for people who, if you have not heard yet, you will be able to get this game, right?
Yes.
A couple days ago, you released a letter following up on last week's letter talking about Gloomhaven and when we can get our hands on this 20-pound baby you got going. So could you give us a little bit more detail about it? Talk us through it a little bit?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the month, I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter for the second printing of Gloomhaven. So previously I had announced sort of combining that with the Founders of Gloomhaven Kickstarter, which is sort of my upcoming game, sort of a standalone Euro. But I decided to split the two Kickstarters up. So the upcoming Kickstarter is just for the reprint. And so that's what everyone's interested in anyway. So that's the important part is getting Gloomhaven into people's hands as soon as possible. So that's going to go up at the end of the month. It's going to run for about a month, and we're going to do some pretty exciting different things with the Kickstarter.
Ooh, stupid.
One of the motivations for doing them both together originally was because Gloomhaven is like a complete game. I didn't really want to add to it, right? I mean, it's big enough as it is, right? So, I didn't want to do stretch goals and stuff for that. So Founders of Gloomhaven was sort of going to fill that role of a project with stretch goals, but I decided to split them up. I'm still not going to do stretch goals, so it's just going to be here it is, you can get it, but I'm going to be doing a big, essentially month-long community involvement project where each day I'm going to be designing a new scenario. And it's going to be a true choose your own adventure thing, with the community. So every day I'm going to have a scenario, I'm going to put it up, and then every day the community as a whole can vote on where the story goes next.
Is that part of the game experience, or is that kind of a thing just to draw people into the Kickstarter page?
Well, yeah. So it's going to be a standalone campaign, but it's at the end of the day, it's going to be linear, if you play it after the fact, but it'll still be something that you can sit down and play. But yeah, if you play during, then you actually have an influence on where the story goes. So it's sort of like a community choose your own adventure thing. I'm pretty excited about it.
That is super cool. The natural follow-up question is, are you ready for a $10 million Kickstarter?
Well, I'm not. I'm selling the game for $100, not $1,000. So I don't expect to hit those levels. But
if you don't hit $5 million with this Kickstarter, I will buy you a steak dinner at the next convention we both go. This thing will hit at least $5 million. I'm calling it.
I don't know. I mean, realistically, I'd be happy if we went over $1 million. I mean, that would be fantastic. I don't know about $5 million, but we'll see.
Yeah, all we know is there's a lot of people out there who want it, because every time I talk about my copy, they're like, "Where do you live, man?"
How can I break into your house and steal it?
All right, so I think we've fed the beast and let people know about the getting Gloomhaven in their hands. So let's transition to talking about the game itself. Anthony, I know you had one kind of kickoff question you wanted to throw at Isaac.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned kind of additional content and new scenarios, and I know like having backed it originally and following the progression of your work on it every week after the Kickstarter concluded, there was a lot of work putting those together, a lot of work building those. What did it look like way back before the game was, I guess before it went to Kickstarter, because I'm sure it's been in the works for a long time, but did you have a map of all these scenarios and what you wanted to do, or just have new ideas that kind of pop up time to time? Is there a map of additional scenarios you're still working on? What does that look like? What does the notebook look like for you?
I guess, I don't know, for a long time I was just sort of working off a Word document, which wasn't that great visually. So eventually I moved it over to like a PowerPoint thing where I could actually sort of actually draw like a map of all the different scenarios and how they related to each other. But yeah, you just, from the beginning, I knew I wanted to do like a branching story path, right? So it's not this linear campaign, but something where you actually got to make choices and decide the fate of what happens in the world. So yeah, I just sort of started writing that and, coming up with where the story branches and maybe how it sort of weaves in and out of each other and comes back together and then splits back apart and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just a day of sitting down and writing out story outlines was sort of where that all started. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of out of the bag in one form or another that I am working on an expansion. So that's currently what I'm doing with that, sort of a similar process of just mapping out lots of scenarios and how they relate to each other.
And then I know you just released, a bunch of those solo scenarios. How did those come about?
So how did those come about? That's a good question. I think I was talking to my friend about the Cragheart, which is one of the character classes. For those who aren't familiar, I just throw out words like Cragheart. So the Cragheart has a lot of abilities that sort of move obstacles around and create obstacles. And he was really excited by this. Like, it's one of his favorite classes. I think that's what he's playing right now in his own campaign, in his own game. And he was interested in having a scenario where you basically created a sort of a tower defense thing, where you're creating all these obstacles to force enemies onto these narrow paths to make it harder for them to get to you. And I thought that was a really cool idea. And, it really only works with that specific class. So I sort of, from that idea came, the idea of, okay, well, let's just design a scenario for that specific class, and it can be a solo thing. Right, so you just play that scenario with one class, and it's focused directly on your abilities and the strengths and weaknesses of that class. And so with that idea, I'm like, okay, well, let's do it for all the classes. And so I sat down and, just studied in depth each class and all the different just the abilities they have and their strengths and weaknesses, and came up with cool scenarios that sort of played off of those specifically, to give the players more of a puzzly feel to the game, where there is almost a specific solution to the scenario. You're going to have to play this card, and then you're going to have to play this card, and then you're going to have to play this card in order to get through this specific challenge. So it becomes more of a puzzle than just a dungeon crawler. And I was really excited by that idea as well.
You mentioned coming up with new scenarios, and I think the base box had something, 96 different scenarios?
Yeah, 95, yeah.
So how do you go about making them all distinct and different? Because that's a lot of scenarios. I remember in Mage Knight came with, which is the kind of the game that this game gets compared to. Mage Knight had a grand total of 4 or 5 scenarios in the box, and that was enough. because of the gameplay was so rich. You have 96, so like I mean, when I think of that many scenarios, I'm thinking they can't be that distinct. And full disclosure, I'm kind of going off of a criticism I heard from our friend and hopeful future podcast guest Jamie Stegmeyer, where he said it could feel a little repetitive. Some of the missions, they're different missions, but you kind of doing the same things. So how did you address that in the design, and is it something that you're mindful of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say like the main way that the scenarios are different are just in sort of like the different monster combinations, right? So there are like 36 different monster types in the game, plus the 13 bosses. And each one, functions differently from each other. Like they'll have individual decks of ability cards, which determines like their behavior in the scenario. So, I mean, at its core, it's a combat game, right? So, like all the abilities on all the cards are sort of, geared towards, moving towards things and killing them. So, I mean, in that sense, there is only so much variation you can have, and if you're sort of not interested in the combat, right, then you're probably gonna feel like it's repetitive because you're doing things that you aren't necessarily excited about. But I mean, if you do get into the combat, then you can begin to see like how each scenario plays out in different ways because of the different monsters that you're fighting and the different configurations that they come in. And that's just sort of like baseline, right? So all the scenarios obviously have like different monsters and different configurations, and then sort of the more you play, the more like unique scenarios you'll begin to unlock as well, where you start getting like different goals or like different other mechanics sort of added in, where now you've got to like escort somebody through the dungeon, like they're just sort of running ahead and you got to make sure they stay alive, or you've got to like loot a bunch of like the goal becomes like looting a bunch of treasure tiles instead of actually killing everything. Like if you just try and kill everything, then you'll end up dead. Or like focusing on a specific monster and just sort of like mitigating the damage of the other monsters, or just like being just like hoarded by monsters and you just have to survive for a specific number of rounds. So I mean, there's a lot of variability to it, I feel. But that's sort of, a rundown of how I sort of approach that is, so if you just play the first like 3 or 4 scenarios, you might, even if you're fighting against different monsters, you might feel it getting a little bit samey. But like if you go along a little bit more than that, you'll start to, like, I wanted people to start with something simple, right, and then sort of add mechanics on top of that as you progress.
So another thing I wanted to ask about, no more full disclosure, I have not played Gloomhaven. I was too dumb to back to Kickstarter the first time. I'm only going off of reviews and things I'm seeing and videos and all that kind of stuff. But another thing that people mention in the community is that this game is hard. And some people are like, oh my god, they can't win or they win by the last card, and it's a big big to do. You actually talk about this when I looked at your site, because you did a really great job putting up designer diaries and stuff. And you talked about the difficulty knob, where it's a way to amp up the difficulty of the game to create that replayability, especially for cooperative games. They should be hard or else you get bored with them.
Right.
So are you happy with where you've set that knob for Gloomhaven?
I don't know. I feel like, it might be set too hard by default, right? So people will come in, even though like the easy setting is there and you're free to use it however much you want. Like, people will come in and they want to play on normal, right? They don't want to feel like they're, slow or something.
Casual gamers.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, we can do normal. I mean, why not? So, and I feel like maybe it was set a little bit too hard. Like it might have been just an artifact of playtesting with people who became very good at the game, right? Because, I mean, you can get very good to the point where normal will feel pretty easy, and then you might want to start increasing the difficulty. But just as a baseline, yeah, it might have started off a little bit too hard. But I don't know. It depends on the player. Like, there are plenty of people who come in, like, play on their first play and don't have any problem with it, and that's sort of what I was hoping for, especially with like the first two scenarios, because those are even easier than the rest. Like, sort of, so those were designed to be sort of an introduction to the campaign and the systems. So yeah, they're supposed to be easier, and so when people come in and sort of just fail miserably even on that, then yeah, that's a little disappointing, I guess. But it's also weird because, you know, like at conventions when I demo the game, like I demo this first scenario, and I can't even think of a time where people failed at that. But that might have just been because I was there to sort of guide them through how to, you know, not do stupid things. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I like that first scenario. It's kind of like you said, it's more accessible, but it's not accessible to the point of boring tutorial like you sometimes find in other games or like in a video game or something. I think it's a good way to get used to the different combat system, which is it's not chucking dice, so people are like, dungeon crawl. This is not what I expected. So.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, the bottom line is the first scenario is supposed to be sort of an introduction, but I mean, you can't really prepare for the hugely varying skill levels of everyone who plays the game. So some people might find it too hard, some people might find it too easy. Like, yeah, and that's what the difficulty setting is for. So just like be patient with it. Like if it's too hard the first time, then just decrease the difficulty and you'll be fine.
Okay. All right, they did include that easy mode. I think Tom Vassell on his run-throughs of the game, he played both of them on easy, just to be able to see content, and that is not an accident. Okay, so I want to ask this question also in the context of quote-unquote legacy, which I'll get to legacy in a second, but I wanted to kind of throw out there that I read about Matt Leacock and Rob Davio. They tuned Pandemic Legacy a little bit easier than regular Pandemic because what they found was in a game where the game state changes, players got more freaked out at failure. So it's like, oh my God, I can never go back.
Yeah.
You know, so was that something that kind of entered into the equation when setting the difficulty?
Well, yeah, I mean, from the beginning, the whole point was to focus on forward progression. So ideally, like the way that I want people to experience this game is like maybe only losing a scenario like maybe every 1 in 10 times or 2 in 10 times or something. Or, I mean, ideally you just win them all and then you get to experience all the content and everything's great, right? I didn't want to like punish people for failing and then having to go and do the same scenario over again. Like you want to try out new things. You don't want to do the same thing over and over. So that was definitely the focus, was trying to make something that people could play through to get the content. But at the same time, it's not as important to like win every time, right? Because there is no real punishment for failure, like as opposed to Pandemic Legacy, where you have 2 chances to beat this month, and if you don't, then you just got to go on and even so there is no punishment for failure in Gloomhaven other than you just have to do it again, right? You get to keep all the experience and all the money that you loot, so you'll be even more powerful the next time you go in and try it.
Cool. So do you regret calling this game Legacy? And I guess I'll explain the question, because when you say, like, Legacy conjures up, especially after Pandemic Legacy, when people think Legacy, they think Pandemic Legacy. And the thing about, so there were 2 things that kind of really bothered the hardcore gamers. One was when Legacy meant limited plays. So you can't tell a gamer I can only play my game 10 times or 50 times or whatever it is. I don't care if it's a million times. If X is not infinity, a gamer is not happy.
Yeah.
And then the other part is that it's not resettable. So you can't, like, go 6 months into Pandemic Legacy, look at the board and go, oh my God, there's fire everywhere, and reset the board. You're stuck with the game that you got. So, but those concepts have kind of latched themselves onto the Legacy concept, like barnacles, where I think that, like, you talk about Legacy, it's a changing game state, or it's opening boxes, so that joy of rediscovering something in the box. I think when you first called this game Legacy, you had those things in mind, but then these other barnacles got attached, and people ask questions that maybe you get tired of answering, or just what I don't know what your experience has been with dealing with the concept of Legacy.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, like I avoided calling it Legacy. Like it was just a campaign game, like an expansive campaign game. Like I don't think anywhere on the Kickstarter page do I use the word Legacy. I mean, it's on the Board Game Geek page, though I constantly think of like just taking that out, because I mean there are Legacy components to it, obviously, with like the map and the stickers and everything, but yeah, I mean I don't consider it like a Legacy game. I feel like Legacy is more of just a mechanic, right, or like a set of tools, right? So that Rob Davio gave us as designers, like, look, like this is some cool stuff that you can do to like add permanence or add, like agency to players' experiences. And so, yeah, and so I sort of think of using, the concept of Legacy like as a tool to expand what I'm trying to accomplish. And so, yeah, that comes through in like stickers on the map and opening boxes, because like opening boxes is just cool. Like it's fun.
If you had to do it over again, would you, like the whole from soup to nuts to releasing Gloomhaven, would you incorporate that word at any point? Or like looking back, does it too much baggage? Does it cause more confusion than you wanted?
No, I mean, I think I'm happy with how it played out. Like I said, like I tried to avoid it for a while, so I don't think, and it was more just like labeled by the community, and there's not really much you can do about that. But yeah, it is kind of surprising, like because that was one of the goals, right? I mean, I had 95 scenarios in this game. Like I wanted it to be just so chock full of content that you wouldn't care about like needing to reset it. And so that was surprising to me, where, like right off the bat, people are like, what, this Legacy, like, oh, I only have limited number of plays. And I'm like, you have 95 plays. Like, isn't that enough? And like,
no, not enough.
And I think it is for people now, like when they're sitting down and playing it, like now that they actually have it and are experiencing it, like they sort of understand, like, oh, okay, like, this is going to give me like 2 years of play. Like I'm happy with that. But yeah, it's like people don't understand like 95, like in their head, like when they just see it on a page, like they have to actually sit down with the game in order to fully understand that, I guess. Or I'm just saying like generally, like there are a lot of people that were, sort of hacked off by that, but now they're more calm.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't personally imagine like half a dozen in, a few weeks in, I'm like, yeah, this will be playing this until my kids are in college. Like, there's a lot here.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think you have PDFs of the map, because really the only quote unquote board thing that changes is the map, and you don't play on the map, you play on the tiles and everything else. And I think you have a PDF available in case you wanted to quote unquote reset the campaign.
Yeah. I mean, it's so all those files are provided, so you can print them off, print off a new map, print off new stickers. I mean, you'll have to find some way to cut the stickers out, but I guess that's what scissors are for. Yeah. So yeah, you can do it if you want to. It'll take a little bit of effort, but it's there.
I'm sure you're at least partially relaxed now that it's all shipped out the first time. Are you excited or nervous at all about kind of diving back into it here in a couple weeks?
Yeah, I haven't really got much rest, so it is a little nerve-wracking, I guess, to be going back into it so soon. But I just feel like it's the right time. Like, we just need to get a second printing going as soon as possible, because there's so many people who are sort of clamoring to get their hands on a copy. So, I want to get it out to all those people as well, and so everyone can experience, playing the game, because I think it's worth experiencing. So yeah. Just this whole last month and a half or so has been fulfillment, and that's been sort of a nightmare, just with all the issues I've been having with Amazon and them shipping out copies, or not shipping out copies, as it were. But we don't need to go into that. But yeah, it's just been tiring, and now we're ramping up for the new one, and so yeah, it's just been a constant whirlwind. Hopefully, at some point, I'll be able to take a little rest, but yeah.
And is that going to ship this year for people?
Yeah, so we're trying to get it out around Gen Con, right? So we're going to start proofing the files in about a week, and so we can get like the printers up and running like during the Kickstarter, once we have a good idea of the quantity that we're going to need, and then it should be available by Gen Con.
$5 million, I guarantee.
This guy's trying to stress you out, Edward.
That would be nice. I mean, I will not lie.
And then you mentioned you're going to separate out the other Kickstarter. Is that something that you're going to launch a little bit later in the year then for Founders?
Yes. Yeah. So we just weren't quite ready with like the graphic design and the artwork. Like, we're still working on it, and I'm still sort of tweaking the gameplay and the balance a little bit. And I just felt like it was holding us back. Like, it came to a point where it's like, okay, we either need to delay the Kickstarter or just sort of separate them. And, we need to get Gloomhaven out as soon as possible. So, yeah, we're just going to separate them. So that's, a continuation of the whirlwind, right? So we're going to conclude Gloomhaven and then start up the Founders Kickstarter pretty soon after that.
I noticed about Founders that the gameplay is 2 to 4. Does this game will not have a solo mode, at least out of the box?
Well, that's actually one of the reasons why we're delaying it, because I did want to work on and get like a solid single player mode implemented before it launched. So yeah, it's something I'm working on. Well, I mean, that I intend to work on. Like, I just have ideas currently. So, but yeah, it's my intention to create a solo variant for the game as well.
I guess, is that an important thing from your perspective as a designer? I mean, some games it just won't happen, and a lot of games will shoehorn it in and it's bad, or
right.
Just won't do it because the game chassis doesn't support that. So I guess what I'm trying to ask, is that an important thing for you to have a solo mode in a game? And if it doesn't work, is it something that you just say, you know what, it's not going to happen?
It is, yeah. So it's important to me. Like, I feel like a large percentage of my audience are solo gamers. Because I think Forge War is a really good solo game, and Gloomhaven is also a really good solo experience. So yeah, I feel like have some following of solo players, and I want to make sure that their play style is met as well in any future game that I make. So yeah, it's important to me to make like a solid solo version of any game that I make. Now, yeah, whether it actually happens it depends on the game. Like, I'm pretty confident in Founders of Gloomhaven, but like I said, like, I haven't got into the nitty gritty yet. So I mean, I could run into insurmountable problems, but I feel like I should be able to come up with something interesting.
All right. And I guess talk a little bit about Founders as distinct from Gloomhaven. Let's get us excited for this Kickstarter as well.
Yeah, so Founders of Gloomhaven is set like hundreds of years before the campaign in Gloomhaven. It's sort of a bunch of different races coming together, sort of each one specializing in a different resource. And so they're coming together to build this town using the resources that they control, sort of creating more advanced resources that'll then get delivered to different building projects in the town. So, building taverns and universities and barracks and all sorts of stuff. So there's some tile placement aspects to it. So you've got a map where you're placing all these different resource tiles and building tiles and sort of building roads between them and all that sort of stuff. And the mechanics for all that are sort of governed by this worker placement sort of thing. Like it's worker placement with a twist, I guess you could say. And so all that's happening. And then you're also sort of voting at the beginning of each round to determine like which of these, like the bigger buildings come out on the board, like the buildings that are worth points. So, you have a specific resource, so you're interested in putting out buildings that are going to give you points for that resource. So there's a lot of vying for control of those as well. I don't know if that was a good description, but
Euro.
Yes. Yes, very Euro, very strict Euro. No slashing and killing of monsters at all. But it'll still have the same sort of aesthetic, right? Which I think is important. So like all the artwork is being done by the same artist, and it's going to look really great.
Awesome.
Which is exciting to me.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I mean, as the big Euro guy on this podcast, getting to revisit that universe in kind of a different context will be fun. Yeah,
and I feel like I don't know. I don't want to like trash on other Euros, but like I feel the large majority, right? Just the themes are so I don't know, uninteresting to me, or just the board and the layout and everything is just kind of blah. So like I feel there's no reason not to sort of put in that sort of Ameritrashy flair to your Euro designs and get people, excited about playing them. At least in my opinion. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, my favorite Euros are very rich in theme. So like the Stegmaier Euros, like Scythe.
Yeah, definitely.
And even a little game like The Pursuit of Happiness, which is a family weight Euro. It's totally but it has the little the funny pictures and the hourglasses, and that I think that's so cool. Like as opposed to this giant sprawling thing where it's like, okay, this great piece goes with that great piece, and this great hex.
And trading, spice in the Mediterranean for lira or whatever. I don't know. I mean, some people find that interesting, but I don't.
Cool.
All right. Awesome, man. Well, just want to say thank you again for coming on. I know you've been super busy and are about to become super busy again. So hopefully you get a little bit of rest here before that starts up. But we wish you all the best. I know Jason wishes you many zeros of best.
Yeah. $5 million of best.
A steak dinner if you don't hit $5 million. I just feel like it's so hot. It's streaking up the BGG ranks. It might even have a chance at like top 10, top 5, even higher than that. I mean, it's the solo community is really excited about it. And for a game with such, I guess, quote unquote, limited release, had some issues with pre-order. I'm just not seeing a lot of negative reviews of this game. I've been combing the internet looking for negative reviews. People just don't have it. Like this is the next evolution of Mage Knight. I guess that's speaking from the solo gamer perspective. Like Mage Knight is the acclaimed kind of quote unquote best solo, and this is an evolution on that, and in all sorts of positive ways. So how could this not just continue to keep on blowing up. I mean, sorry to kind of blow sunshine all over the place, but I think it's that exciting. It really is.
Oh yeah, I think it definitely has a bright future. Like, I mean, it's already like 31 on the Board Game Geek rankings. It's like it's crazy. Like, it blows my mind. Like, I knew that it was going to be good and people were going to like it, but just the extent of it has just been beyond anything I could have expected. So yeah, I mean, it has a bright future. I don't know about like dethroning Mage Knight. I mean, I think there's room for both games, and I think they're fairly different from each other. I mean, you've got the same sort of fantasy theme and card play, but the card play in the two games is very different. So, but yeah, I mean, so I'm excited to see where it goes. I think it's going to do well in the future.
Well, you got my backing money, at least that.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Isaac, again for coming on. Really appreciate it, and best of luck next month with that campaign.
Yeah, thanks. I had a good time.
For this week, that's going to be everything. We appreciate you guys stopping by and listening, and until next week, we'll save you a seat at this table for one.
Later, everybody.